So here's some of the things we're going to talk about tonight. Some of the most popular methods for digital voice. A couple of the solutions out there today that many of us have tried and used over the years. Some of the advantages, the disadvantages, the hardware required, also software. What does it take to make all this stuff come together? What the software looks like, as well as links to the technology, where the pieces live, all the data bits, where they're hiding, and something not presented, but will be available for conversation afterwards or something if someone's interested in. And this is the VHF and UHF methods of FreeDV, specifically around the FreeDV 2400A and 2400B modes. These are some experimental modes that are coming together. I made an update to the ARRL handbook back in 2016. So there's a whole section on digital voice in there. And I added a lot of details about these new modes that are not quite ready yet, but are kind of being tested. Specifically, the 2400A is going to be something similar to what we use today on like DMR, Fusion, D-Star, those kind of digital modes, but it will be used in the Codec2 method. And many of you may have heard some things in the past, fairly recently, about M17. M17 is another new digital mode. We're not really going to talk about that for tonight, but if you haven't heard about it, start looking about it, because it's really pretty neat stuff. It also uses Codec2, and it is focusing heavily on the VHF, UHF side, and even the 1.2. Hardware soon to be coming to support that, but more on that in another presentation. Let's see. And some of the most popular methods, the past and present. AOR, if any of you old timers like myself remember some of the early stages of digital voice. I'll have another slide here with some pictures of what that looks like. That was a hardware solution many years ago. WinDream was a software solution. It's no longer used. It's kind of been phased out a long time ago, about almost 15 years ago, I guess, when we stopped using that. But it was an early test of how practical digital voice over HF could be done. FDMDV was the real first time we had a good, simple Windows solution for digital voice. It had a very moderate user interface to it. It's no longer being used. It's been replaced with FreeDV, but one of the downfalls it had is it was using a proprietary commercial codec. And so because of that, it made it very difficult when we wanted to try to make some hardware changes and roll out a client that was updated with new features, but yet still had that proprietary commercial codec in there. The company wasn't quite as fond about letting us go forward with giving that client away with that codec in there, even though we used it for about 5 years with no problem, and their understanding that it was okay. But when it got time for us to start doing some refresh on the code, they kind of said we probably shouldn't do that. So we had to come up with another solution, and that's kind of where FreeDV was born. But another thing, D-Star, many of the people in this room, I'm sure, have got D-Star radios. That's mostly used on VHF, UHF, a little on 1.2, but it is also used on HF. FreeDV is mostly what we're going to talk about tonight, using the Codec2 codec, as I mentioned, and also based on that FDMDV user interface. Again, just a simple point click, pick some speeds and minor things that we'll show what that looks like here shortly. Depending on the mode, it's a very, very narrow mode. So if you kind of think back a little bit, when all this digital voice part of this was coming about, being about 15 years ago, the HF bands were really busy. It was edge to edge with people everywhere. So having something that was very narrow like this, 1.0 kilohertz to 1.5, was an amazing breakthrough. It's something that's very spectrum friendly. And so fortunately, we've been able to keep up with that and do incredible things with just a tiny amount of bandwidth. And let's see. So here's a picture of the AOR devices. This is a little hardware box here. It made it real simple. You just wire this right into the audio jack of your radio. As old as this was, it's more like your legacy radios where they had the audio interfaces on the back like we would commonly use for packet radio and things like that. Or it could plug right into your microphone jack of your radio. The terribly unfortunate part is how much it cost. As you see there, this was selling for about $650 per radio or per unit. So somebody else would have to spend that much on their side to make that work. They came out with a little bit lesser expensive model, but even that was $400. So definitely kind of up there. But we'll see if this audio comes through for us. Hopefully you have to let me know if this comes through all right, if you can hear it.
Okay, W2 VRI, K0PFX in St. Louis, Missouri. Okay, Brian, looks like we're synced up now. And I've got my power back now, peak about 90 watts, and the rig is a JRC, JST245, and a C.
So you can kind of get a feel for what that sounded like. They did come through, right? You're able to hear that audio?
Yeah, that was loud and clear.
Okay, excellent. Okay, thanks. But today, D-Star is another option that's readily available. And some of the more common radios, 9100 of ICOM, mostly always in the ICOM radios, 7100, IC 705 now. D-Star is also available in the Kenwood D74, but that doesn't do HF, of course, just VHF and UHF, other than the listening for HF. It certainly does that. This device here, FreeDV, it's called a smart mic. So the label is SM1000. This is kind of similar to that AOR device in concept, where it can plug right into the data jack of your radio or your microphone or any other simple way of wiring into your audio in and out of your radio with push to talk and such. But the interesting thing here is the form factor isn't very user friendly, but it does. You notice there's a speaker on top here, and then there's also a small microphone part right here. There's on the other side of this is a push to talk button. So the concept is you could connect this to your radio if you did not want to use a computer or anything like that. You could wire this into your radio and it literally lift it up like a microphone and talk right into the box. I have one in my truck, in my console, and it's connected to my TS480 in the car. So, and in fact, I was using this on the way back from the Orlando hamcation here just several weeks ago, talking to guys on FreeDV running mobile. Now, in my case, I didn't really use the microphone concept of this. I plugged in a headset, and I had a little manual push-to-talk switch, but it's fantastic for doing this because, when you're driving down the freeway at 70 or 80 or whatever it takes to stay ahead of people running you off the road, you really don't want to be spinning dials on your radio. So this makes it real easy, just simple push to talk and work HF. Definitely lots of fun. But here's a little bit of what FreeDV sounds like. So here's what the analog side of the audio sounds like. So that's very similar to, for those of you who may be familiar with digital slow scan, the audio tones sound real similar to that. Now, here's what it sounds like once that very audio is decoded.
I've noticed between Ohio and Texas, sometimes on 20, you get some really, really strong propagation. I know I run JT65, and I usually try to run like milliwatts when the band's good. I have fun seeing how low I can go. My K3, we're going to have a lot.
Okay, And let's see. And so now we'll talk a little bit about what are the requirements to make that happen. So typically you need just some kind of simple computer to radio interface. It's a digital type connection, nothing different than what you'd already do with how you operate maybe PSK31 with FLDG or some other utility, or FT8 with your WSJTX and other modes like that. And that handles the base part of it, the digital side of it. But you do need one other audio interface, and that's the analog side. So that could be as simple as just a headset, whether it's a USB headset or even plugging in the microphone and speaker jacks of your computer, because most computers today already have a sound card of some kind, or any other simple analog. And that could even be like a USB dongle for that matter, and then plug it in a simple PC headset to that. The software is free. It is available for Windows, Linux, and Mac. The Android side has been in development for a little while, but there hasn't been a great deal of movement in that space just yet. So it's kind of still in a conceptual stage. FreeDV is 100% open source. That was the #1 requirement for using this Codec2, because that also is open source. The whole idea is trying to use something that's free, easy. A lot of people can support it, and we don't have to get stepped on like we did in the past of having to deal with proprietary commercial components of software that might stifle the expansion and exploration of new modes and tricks and things that we're trying to build into the software. The software can also be integrated with a 6000 series flex radio as a FDVU mode. We've been beta testing this for a few months now. It's really pretty slick. For those of you that may have been familiar with flex radio for many years, they used to have FreeDV as a mode, an application you could install into the radio, when Steve Hicks created that as a model for other software vendors to try to follow. But over the course of a few years and some upgrades in their software and changes to their the client side, they actually broke that piece and it no longer works anymore. But we were lucky enough to find an incredibly good developer with a great interest in FreeDV, and he's been helping us bring this back to life. Although right now it's being done requiring a small teensy 4.1 module. I'll have a picture of that in a little bit, but it's just a tiny little thing. Looks like a Raspberry Pi Zero in form factor, but it's kind of doing a little bit of the audio offloading from the radio. There's a code issue in the Flex radio itself today, and that's what broke it when that happened. And that has not been fixed yet, and Flex is very aware of it, and it's on their chart to take care of, but for right now it hasn't made it to the top of the chart yet. So but the neat thing about it is just like today, if you go to upper sideband or lower sideband or digital upper sideband, whatever, once you install this tiny little software component, there's a mode on there called FDVU for upper sideband and FDVL for lower sideband, depending on what band you're operating on. But it makes it real easy, because then you don't need a PC whatsoever. You just select the mode, and whatever microphone and audio sources you have set up on your Flex radio, you can operate right there, and that's really pretty sweet. Again, talking a lot about the very narrow bandwidth. It's much less than a sideband signal. 1.1, 1.0 or so to 1.5 kilohertz, depending on which mode that you happen to select. And I have a chart in a moment. I'll show some of the differences there. And then of course that smart mic hardware as a hardware solution. And that's only if you choose to go that direction, of course. Most of us are doing this on a PC, whether it's a Linux box or Mac or Windows, more commonly the Windows, but the software works on all of those, as I mentioned. The greatest advantage, this is a big one for me, is there's no static to listen to. when you have FreeDV on, it's total silence until a voice comes right out of the speaker, and it sounds just like what you heard a moment ago coming through. Now we do have to, as with any other digital mode, sometimes the selective fading comes in, and you may hear the band fading slightly, and it makes the audio sound almost like it drops a character here or there, things like that. But for the most part, it's amazingly how well it works. And of course, I keep harping on the narrow bandwidth. That's such a big plus for this. Using your PC mic, it really opens up all kinds of possibilities. So whether you're using a headset or USB headsets or even Bluetooth for that matter, I have several Bluetooth headsets I use with this quite often. It's real simple to upgrade new versions. Majority of the time, every time you go to a new version with new features, things like that, it carries over your existing configuration with you. So it's easy to install right over the other one. There have only been a couple of times where there were enough significant changes that it required a reset of the configuration database. And then, of course, you had to go back and reset your audio up and your push to talk, things like that. But that's pretty rare. I'd say 1 out of about 30 or 40 updates do you ever run into that. Hardware solutions, certainly a disadvantage if you ever get into something like that. Speaking mostly like the AOR device, that device was not flashable. You couldn't do anything with it. It was a one-time purchase, and when it fell out of favor, it unfortunately didn't go very far. And it certainly wasn't, the software side of it was kind of open and shared, but the hardware part was not. So it kind of limited its expansion into the real world, I guess. Certainly with hardware, standards are always changing. We know if you can't flash it, you're going to park it. So that's really a sad case, but it does happen. One of the disadvantages of FreeDV, I'll say specifically, is it takes a few minutes to set up the audio. I'll show you that in a moment, but there are some audio mappings you have to do. Not a lot different than what we do with any of our other digital mode software, other than the fact that you basically have to do it twice, because you do have to set up your audio for digital side, and then you have to do it again for the analog side. And so sometimes that second set of configuration can get a little bit confusing, and some people get tripped up over that. But it's really not too bad at all once you get into it. So hardware, as I mentioned, the AOR devices, things, D-Star, this Thumb DV. This is kind of interesting. This was another very clever device that you could plug into the USB jack of the back of a Flex 6000 series radio, and it would give you D-Star on the Flex radio over HF. Now, as I mentioned, the FreeDV waveform plugin was broken with a software update. Well, when it broke FreeDV, it broke this D-Star option as well. So both of those again are on the roadmap for attention, but we're just waiting for things to get changed on that. FreeDV does need a second sound card, or maybe I should say a second sound device. And that is quite often, just as I mentioned a while ago, could be your local microphone and speaker, whatever you're using for analog today. Could be a standalone device, whether it's a speakerphone or just any other kind of remote Bluetooth, even things like that. The SM1000, as I mentioned, you don't need a PC. That's a kind of a quick and dirty, simple way to get on the air. And this is the software. There's a link here to the software. I'll show you what all of this looks like in a moment. I'm just kind of going through some of these real fast here, so I apologize for boring you to death with all these slides. So let's see if we can get through this last part here. Virtual audio is another solution. If you happen to have a Hermes HF radio, the Anon, which is the commercial version of the Hermes radio, legacy radios, HPSDR, legacy flex radios like the 3000, 5000, 1500, things like that, are very familiar with these virtual audio connections. And that can be your second audio source as well. So lots of ways to get through that part of it. This is what it looks like on an HPSDR Hermes Anon radio. with the Power SDR software. But this doesn't really tell you much about FreeDV. This is just the basic RF side, the radio side. And then this is what it looks like on a flex radio, as you saw a little teaser about that a few moments ago, with the FreeDV screen. And I'll have a lot more visibility of this here in a moment. But quick and dirty here, you can see over here on the right-hand side there are multiple modes to FreeDV that have evolved. When all of this started, we only had this one 1600 mode that was a kind of a base level standard. But through some brilliant engineering, they came up with new ways to twist things around and shift some bits in different places and really pull the voice out of the noise, literally way down below the noise floor now, and do some really, really neat stuff. And let's see here. So real fast, I want to kind of blow through these slides. This is that audio interface I was talking about that can sometimes get a little bit confusing. For anyone that already has a flex radio, you're very familiar with the bazillion audio ports that you get with just installing the Smart SDR software. When you get the 24 audio channels on the first time you install the software. But all you really have to remember is where your audio is, just like you would with your other digital mode software. But the tricky part is now you have your output from computer to your speaker or headphones. So you have to remember where you want the analog audio to come out. And then it's just the reverse for your transmit side. You tell it where you want the analog audio microphone to be used, and then where you want the digital side to be used. And then you have the simple push to talk. Again, this is very, very much like anything you use on any other software. You pick your radio, your baud rate, COM port. Using hamlib is always the best option if that's available to you, of course. You can do PSK reporting. This PSK reporter is a very new feature. The really neat thing about this is you can, if you have this box checked, you put your call sign and your grid square in here. As you're transmitting, and other stations that have this option selected, you will the receiving station will send that data into the PSK site, and so you can look at that map at any time. One of the problems a lot of people always have around the world is, where is the activity? Who's on the air? What are they doing? Where can I find them? And this is a really good way. With this feature here, you can look at the world map and see all the stations and where they're at, so you can link up with them. This is a multicolor. This is for the waterfall. You saw the simple black background interface with the red in the middle. But you have the option to change these colors. Probably not very commonly used or whatever, but you do have that option. This is really nice. This voice keyer. This is kind of like a CW keyer. You can record an audio file with you have to play some tricks with the audio settings or whatever for the format. You need an 8-bit monochrome type recording, but you can put your CQ message or any other message you want to be sending out at the click of a button to generate searching for someone or letting people know you're on the air. Now this is probably one of the hottest new features, this simultaneously decode of all HF modes. If you remember from one of the previous slides, there are about 7 or 8 different modes for FreeDV. While we typically only use 1 or 2 commonly as more popular, the others are available. But if you have this simultaneously decode all HF modes turned on, regardless of what mode they're on, or whatever mode you're listening for or set to, you will be able to decode there, and the client will show you which mode that is that's coming through. So that's really handy. Has helped us a great deal. We've been able to do cross-mode conversations, not even know it sometimes because it works so transparently. It was always a problem in the past, is why I mentioned that so much, is because sometimes people would be on the wrong mode and you'd see them in the waterfall, but you had no idea what mode they were on and how you could communicate with them. But this makes that really easy. A new update recently kind of takes care of some of like a simple graphic equalizer where you can set your audio and things like that. A nice thing about that, many of you have probably heard some digital sound and recordings in the past, and like DMR and some of the other digital modes. Sometimes, depending on the radio, they may not sound quite as natural or as clear as you're used to hearing them on analog radios and things like that. With this software, you can adjust all of the levels here, and you can do a couple different things. One is you can really, if you know what that person sounds like normally, then it's really easy to go in and you can adjust these and really make the audio sound very nice. But another thing that I find very handy is that if you may have heard, if you plug a speaker in your computer or a microphone, whatever you put in there, some microphones, some speakers sound different or work better or not as well, things like that. You can have a $5 microphone and a $50 microphone, but with these settings, with the equalizer set, you can actually balance that out and make them both sound exactly the same. And I've done that many times with a $3 USB dongle for audio. I can make sound every bit as good as my Heil headset and things that are many times more expensive. This is that PSK reporter map I was talking about. So you can find other stations, where they are. If you mouse over these, it'll show you what who reported it, what their SNR reading was when it was captured, and what frequency they're on, and lots of things like that. Very, very handy to us. So this is a quick shot of what the client looks like when it's in the transmit mode. You see the voice spectrum right here, your voice peaks going up and down as you're transmitting. And again, you have all your different modes over here on the right. Excuse me. There's also a squelch level setting depending on what level you want to take your receiver down to be able to hear them, even in the digital realm. This is what the waterfall looks like. If you notice, it's a little bit hard to see, I believe, but there are multiple bands in here. And so one of the highlights of this, in the 1600 mode, it was a lot more visible the way it worked, because the 1600 mode actually had a pilot carrier right in the center, and then it had 7 data bands on each side of it. So, so one of the highlights of the way FreeDV works is it takes each of our audio, our speech pattern, if you will, and it takes the whole level of the voice and it breaks it into each one of these carriers. So your super lows are down here, your super highs are up here, and then it repeats it over on the other side. And so the beauty of that is if you get some selective fading, or you get a sideband station or some kind of interference that may encroach on half of your signal, if it only gets to half of your signal, you'll still get 100%, never miss a syllable of that conversation because of all the way it's copied to the other side. Very, very slick concept in the way that works. And then here's what it looks like when you change modes. So some modes, as I mentioned, are a little bit wider than others. Sometimes you can really get it very, very narrow. And by changing the mode real time, which you can now do with the newer versions of the client, even while you're transmitting, you can click on over here and change the mode, and the client on the other end will automatically, within about 1/4 of a second, relock on and continue decoding. You may miss a syllable or whatever, but you won't miss a whole word, that's for sure. Now, this is kind of interesting here because for those that are really keen on the details, this kind of gives you a full breakdown of the different modes. The 1600 mode that I was talking about, the 700 Delta mode, that's the one we've kind of adopted as more commonly used. Even though we're still continuing to test some of the other modes, 700D really works well. And the reason we're using it more than anything is this SNR factor over here. This is what really makes a difference. So with 1600 mode, your SNR had to be a +4 or higher, or you just couldn't decode the signal at the other end. It would chop out, drop out, things like that. Well, with a positive 4 SNR 15 years ago, that was not a big deal. We had fabulous band conditions and things were really great. Turnabout this year or the last several years, not so much. It's really been pretty tough. So there had to be some code changes to try to deal with that. This 700C mode came along. It actually went down to a 2, which is really good, a lot better, but we still need a whole lot more. Now, I'll show the 700E. I'll skip over the D there for a second, but that one needs a positive 1. And the 2020 mode, the codec has changed a little bit, shifting things around using an LPC net codec. And it does make the voice sound a little more natural, a little bit more richer, if you will. But again, you need this positive 2. Now, the real magic behind this 700D, probably the simple way to say this is that your single sideband is about what you would consider a 0 on the SNR. And David Rowe, who's the author of the Codec2, making all this happen, his goal from day one has been trying to make FreeDV achieve performance better than single sideband. And once he developed this and released this 700D about 3-4 years ago, it absolutely is doing that today. And I've got some several recordings. We've been able to do some comparisons. One of which was a station in Austria. We captured an audio with him. We were communicating for a while, and he wasn't terribly strong, but he was perfectly clear, never missed a syllable, word, or anything. And so out of curiosity, we said, okay, well, signals are a bit low. Let's switch to sideband. We went to single sideband and could not even tell he was on the air. Absolutely neither of us could hear each other. And we switched back to FreeDV, came right back through perfect. So it is pretty amazing, and it's still being improved. Even this isn't good enough in the eyes of David and the developers. They're continuing to try to improve that, make that work even better, but definitely a bit tricky to do so, that's for sure. I mentioned, and again, I apologize, I kind of trying to zip through these slides here as fast as I can to get through this part of it. But this is the Teensy device. This is, again, it's just a tiny little USB plug on the side of it. The USB cable plugs into a USB connector on the back of the Flex radio. You flash some special code into here to do part of that audio offloading I was talking about. Then you install another component, a waveform that installs into the Flex radio, and then it shows up like this. A new mode called FDVU, and as I mentioned, also an FDVL if you happen to be on the lower sideband. To keep up with people, this is something we try to do because there are people all over the world, different time zones, different languages for that matter. We can't always communicate with each other, so we have this FreeDV HF QSO finder. So it's a great place. You go to this website, qso.freedv.org. I have a link in a moment here. But in there, you can chat back and forth. Yeah, so you can see where people are and what they're doing and things like that. And then down here at the bottom, there are some suggested frequencies. So if somebody says, well, I want to go to 40 meters, what's a good frequency? Well, we've been adopting this 7177. It doesn't mean you can't go anywhere else. Just like any other mode that we're doing on HF today, we can go anywhere you can do voice. A tricky thing about this, while it is in digital in nature, it's still considered voice. Just like D-Star and things like that, they're still considered voice to the real world. So we have to operate in voice privileged areas. But so we have 10 meters and all these other bands to operate with. The nice thing is that once you log on here and you can start chatting with people, and if you select one of these frequencies, it puts your call sign up here on the left-hand side. So it puts you in a little box to kind of tell people that, hey, K5WH just happens to be on 20 meters right now, or this VK2 station is on 40 meters. And then you have all this information down here. These are the stations that are logged into the QSO finder. You can't see it on this one. I'll show you on the real-time screen in a moment. But when you mouse over this, it actually changes information on the left-hand side over here that tells you their name, their location, and even a map over there that can show you where they're located and things. Here's some reference links where the FreeDV software is, the QSO finder that I was just talking about. This is a virtual audio cable, probably not important to you unless you're running one of those legacy radios. A quick startup guide and YouTube videos. There are tons of videos. I've done videos. If you go out to YouTube and type in FreeDV, you'll probably either see one of mine or someone that was working in contact with me and things like that. So lots of places there, but I definitely want to make sure I give some shout outs to these guys. David Rowe, being the author of the Codec2 part of it, won the Dayton Amateur Radio Association award in 2013 for a technical award. And he's designed the codec and the modem software. Dave Witten kind of did the GUI side, the user interface to the Windows initially, although that has been evolved quite a bit since then. And then this is another accolade that just came out like barely a week ago. The 2022 Amateur Radio Software Award was given to David Rowe because of Codec2. And you'll probably see this in a couple of other places. Codec2 was also used on a satellite. There's one that was using Codec2 as one of the audio channels as an experiment, and it worked really good as long as the satellite was up there. Unfortunately, it kind of came back to Earth, so we're not using that one anymore. And let's see, another mention, a special, very special thanks to Munir, K5WH. He's recently been picking up the software additions, all the neat features and tricks going on with that, code updates, and just doing incredibly magical things to make that happen. So let me, like I say here, enough of the slideware. I hope everybody's still awake. But let's take a look at what it looks like, and hopefully I can get past this audio issue, and you'll be able to hear what's really going on. So let me end the slide part of this and see if I can bring the radio back up. Okay, so there's a lot of noise on the band right now, but let me, are you hearing the noise right now with this up like it is?
Yep, it's back.
Okay, let's see if I can find a way to, see the speakers are all turned off, so I'm wondering how that's happening. Even with the speaker disabled. You still hear the noise?
Yep.
Wow, okay. That is all kinds of strange. Do you hear that noise? Or does it sound like this same noise here when I do this?
Well, there's something kicking in the background, but yeah.
Something like that, huh?
Sounded like the volume change going on.
I'm sorry, Jeff, what was that again?
Sounded like the volume change going on or something.
Oh, the volume
Something over
change.
there.
Oh, really? Okay. Let's see.
Nope.
That is every audio source turned off. If I turn that one off, does that turn it down by chance?
Nope.
No. So
Keep going. It seems like it might have muted.
yeah. So yeah, because that was muted there. So let's see if you can hear this. I want to see if this actually overrides that audio. Trying to get the volume going up here. Sorry, I don't even hear it. Oh, there it is.
And yes and R.
I could hear that.
You can hear that?
I know
But I
that's,
can get about 70% of the transmission decoded here. So the 700 seems to work very quickly.
You see the barber striping poles, or you see how the selective fading was taking place. And so that was kind of dropping out. That station was in Austria there. I'm hoping the audio is loud enough to get over that noise you were talking about.
yeah, you can hear it, and the noise
Low
kind of
filter.
fades to the back of it.
How did that work out? K5WH.
Yeah, so that was kind of fading there. Let's see if we can find a better one here.
I know there is some filtering for that, but it's all default, and that gets rid of a lot of it, but not all the time. I'll catch up with you later in for our
Oh, I was kind of broken up. I'm sorry, I didn't hear that, Jeff. What was that?
So we're getting that. It sounds a little Stephen Hawking, but it's coming in.
Okay. You're right. So anyway, one of the things you can do also with this is that if you want to, say, work an analog conversation, rather than having to reconfigure the radio, you can actually click on this tab here for analog. There's a lot of static on 20 meter right now, but then you can actually click on this push to talk and use your PC speakers and work analog there too. Let's see. Trying to see if there's anything else that could possibly be triggering that, but I cannot think of anything at all that would be triggering that other audio part. But anyway, so you can see here in the waterfall, there's not much happening. Kilowatt 5 Whiskey Hotel. I can transmit right here. You can see my voice going up and down as it is right there. And if someone was out there, they would probably answer us. But 20 may not be very good right now. I may have to go over to 40 meters, some other band here in a little bit. K5WH standing by. But all in all, I guess to kind of bring this back around, we are active on several different frequencies. In fact, let me stop the sharing so I'm not killing you guys with that noise. We're active mostly on 20 meters. We spend the majority of our time on 20 because that's where larger footprint is covered during the day typically. In Europe, the guys over in the UK, they have a net every day on 75 meters, and they operate over there. Germany has been using 40 meters. And so there are a lot of different stations at different places, just depending on where you happen to go, I guess. I guess what I should do right now is, I know we're kind of getting kind of long here in the meeting, so I apologize for that. So let me pause and see if there are any questions or anything I can help clarify for you that may have gone way too fast through or anything. Oh, so many questions.
We've got a couple in the chat. Rick asked if there were any issues with running power. Like, can you run a kilowatt?
You absolutely can run a kilowatt. You definitely don't need to because it is operating digital. I run a half a watt, and I can communicate all across the United States on a half a watt just fine, as long as the band is just moderately open. I typically run about 25 to 30 watts majority of the time, only because I want to get over the band, the selective fading that's taking place on the band. But power is completely unnecessary. You'll find we've done that comparison as well. A person with 10 watts and a person with 500 watts sound no different whatsoever the majority of the time. The only thing it really does, like I say, is it helps you get over the band fading that might take place sometimes.
How are QSOs logged to Logbook of the World?
There is no connection today to any logbooks. So it would have to be a manual log entry if you want to do that. So
Say it's a digital mode, or what would you call it?
yeah, you call it digital voice. The same thing for D-Star. There's a mode called digital voice in there.
Very cool. That's all I've got from the chat. One of those was mine. So
Oh.
I'm sure there are others out there.
And yes, I think I see your question there, Jeff. Codec2 is definitely open source. In fact, it's even encouraged if someone wants to try to develop new features or even change the client up a little bit to add some GUI interface options and things like that. The guys that are doing the code today would highly encourage you to do so and help you do anything you want to do with that. There is somebody else that has taken that same concept and they've added video to it. So while you're carrying on a voice conversation in the background, at the same time, you can be transferring images like similar to a slow scan image, but it goes right on in parallel while you're transmitting. Now, I will say that when you're doing the video mode, the bandwidth does definitely jump up. So instead of the 1.1 the 1100 hertz that we normally operate with on 700D, it jumps up to a little over almost 2.5 kilohertz wide.
Rick's in the chat. His mic's not working. He asks if you tune across the band, if there are multiple DV signals there, will your receiver lock onto them like they do with an FM broadcast?
I wouldn't say it locks onto them, but if you're on if you dial up their frequency, it will suddenly start coming through. Kind of like digital radio in your car. When you get to it, you may see it on the band as in your spectrum view or something like that on your newer radios. You'll see it as a steady spike or something. And once you click on it and you tune it in, all of a sudden a voice just starts climbing out of the speaker for you.
We hear you, Chris.
You trying to send a CW there, Chris? Is that what that was? How do you know exactly what frequency they're on? Well, that does get a little bit tricky, but that's the purpose of that QSO finder that we were showing earlier. The idea is if you log on to the QSO finder, you can post the frequency that you're on to let people know. A big advantage to that is for several of us that have beams and things like that, if we know who's trying to bring up their client or make a contact and things like that, we can point our antennas that way and try to give them all the help we can to get them on the air for a successful contact.
That's really cool. Any idea how many hams are playing with FreeDV today?
Well, let's see. So that's kind of a tricky question. So I should probably tell you that the FD MDV client came out back in 2007. The FreeDV client came out just barely 10 years ago. And so I didn't do this as a logging utility, but I immediately started an Excel spreadsheet for every single different contact that I made. I made sure there were no duplicates. When I started, like I say, back in 2012, to this day, I think I worked the 825th different contact or whatever. But that in no way does that mean there's that many people. There are probably a dozen, I'd say a dozen very active people that you can hear almost every day, kind of similar to the way D-Star is. There are lots of people that have the capabilities, but not everybody is doing it all at the same time. In my case, I suffer from being able to look at one thing for too long. So I always have FreeDV running on my second slice of my Flex radio anytime my radio is turned on. But then the other slice, or I have 4 slices, but one of the other slices, I switch between like BVARC and WSJTX or FLDigi, some other digital mode, and some occasionally sideband and things like that. But FreeDV is always running in the background, which is another nice thing about it, because I could be doing different things around the house, and all of a sudden I hear a voice coming out of my speaker really clear. We've also done this through satellites, the linear satellites. So it's a lot of fun when you do that too. What else could I answer for you?
Walter, a few years ago, I experimented with FreeDV on the older Flex radios. And I noticed that it took about an S7 or S8 signal before it would decode. I'm assuming that from what you've described, that has really developed so that you can get down to the noise level and actually below
the noise. Exactly correct. Yeah, significantly different than what it was, I would say, as late as about maybe 4 years ago.
Yeah,
so if you tried it before then you should probably look at it again. It will be much different.
well, I've already downloaded the software, but I ran into a computer problem.
Oh,
so
no.
I haven't been back to it yet. So.
Oh, okay.
Might be a good time for Walter to plug his Zoom room.
That's right. Come on over to my Zoom channel sometime. We have a whole room full of people working on this stuff all the time. We're bouncing around over there. Just as a quick plug for that, we're always doing something. Many of us are on FreeDV. We have DMR in the background, and Fusion, things like that. We're doing working satellites. We're doing FT4 through the satellites, and FreeDV through the satellites. So all kinds of different ways to burn up the cycles on your computer for sure.
Very good. Thank you.
Certainly. The FreeDV is still changing. For those of you going to Dayton, we'll have a booth at Dayton for that. Unfortunately, I won't be there this year. At least I don't think so. Something might change there. But and of course, we're doing presentations on many of the different online ham conventions, if you will, that have been taking place. So you'll probably see it all over the place. But the client is still heavily being developed. And again, that's only been that way for about the last year and a half, 2 years. So it's still evolving. And if somebody has ideas or something you'd like to see added into it, we'd love to hear that because we'd like to incorporate all those kind of things.
Five.
One more question. I have a Flex. That thing sitting behind me. It's a 6500.
Okay.
Am I going to need any additional hardware to operate FreeDV?
If you want to use the Windows client or Linux client, you don't need any hardware at all. If you want to use the Teensy module, the one that we're testing with now, so that you have the waveform that you can install, you will need that Teensy 4.1 module. They're about $25 on Amazon or something, and then you don't need the client at all. The other really nice thing about it, being that you have a Flex, you're probably familiar with the iOS versions of Smart SDR for your iPhone or iPads and things like that. The real nice thing is you can bring up your iPad or iPhone, connect to your radio, and go into this FDVU mode right from your phone and operate FreeDV remotely. And you don't need a PC. You don't need any additional software running on your phone or anything like that.
That's neat.
It's very slick, very, very slick.
Say, Walter, is Mel Witten still involved?
Absolutely. Yeah, Mel is very heavily involved with all of this. In fact, I was talking to him just yesterday afternoon on FreeDV.
He'll be up at Dayton.
He'll definitely be at Dayton. Yes, he will. In fact, Mel is actually responsible for the digital presentations for Dayton. And so he's pulling together. He asked me if I would do a presentation on FreeDV at Dayton, but as I told him, I wasn't going to make it this year. So we have Manir going to do the presentation for us there.
Cool. I hope to see him.
Yeah, good deal. That's great.
Any other questions while we have Walter here?
All right, sounds kind of quiet. Well, first of all, thank you very much for allowing me to speak to you guys today. I look forward to coming out again for maybe some other presentation. I have several more things I'm working on. Maybe we'll get a chance to revisit with you guys. So.
Thank you very much for agreeing to do this, especially with no notice. Sorry about that. And I'll take one more opportunity to plug your Zoom meeting. Walter was featured in QST in last month's issue, is that right?
February, page 13.
And the link to his Zoom meeting is in the article and is always on. And there's always someone in there to help hams with whatever they need help with. Pretty much anything amateur radio related, there's folks in the room ready to answer questions and help guys get on the air. So thanks, Walter, very much appreciate it. The other thing I'll mention, I guess, before we close is don't forget the Greater Houston Tailgate this Saturday. Hope to see everybody there. There's going to be lots of wheeling and dealing and raffles and fun times. So info's on the BVARC.org website. And if you have any questions, feel free to email Mike, who had to step out, or email me. We're both good on the roster and on QRZ. So thanks, everyone, for coming. Very much appreciate it.
Thanks for putting it on.
Chat, we can certainly do that.
Excellent. Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate it, guys. Always enjoyed. Always great meeting up with you guys.
Thanks again, Walter. Very much appreciate it.